नाज़रीन, आप देख रहे हैं प्रोग्राम द रिव्यू कामरान यूसुफ और शहबाज राना के साथ। द रिव्यू में हम पाकिस्तान की मईशत, खारजा अमूर और नेशनल सिक्योरिटी से जुड़े मामलों पर बात करते हैं। इस हफ्ते बाकायदा तौर पर वर्ल्ड बैंक ने कंट्री पार्टनरशिप फ्रेमवर्क के तहत जो अगले 10 साल के लिए वो 20 अरब डॉलर का पाकिस्तान को कर्जा देने का इरादा रखते हैं, जो 6 मुख्तलिफ शोबों में, जिसमें सर फहरिस्त तालीम और सेहत का शोबा है, उसको रखा गया है। प्राइम मिनिस्टर शहबाज शरीफ ने भी इस तकरीब में शिरकत की और कहा कि ये जो 10 साला वर्ल्ड बैंक का प्रोग्राम है, ये एतमाद है जो मौजूदा हुकूमत की बेहतरीन मुआशी जो पॉलिसीज़ हैं। और उसके साथ उन्होंने ये कहा कि इस तरह के प्रोग्रामों से यकीनी तौर पर जो वो पाकिस्तान का तबका है जिस पर उस तरीके से इन्वेस्ट नहीं किया जा सकता, इस प्रोग्राम के ज़रिए इन्वेस्ट किया जा सकेगा। आज के प्रोग्राम की खुसूसी बात ये भी है कि ब्रेक के बाद हमें जो वाइस प्रेसिडेंट हैं वर्ल्ड बैंक के फॉर साउथ एशिया, वो ज्वाइन करेंगे और उनसे हम तफसील से बात करेंगे इस प्रोग्राम से मुतालिक। लेकिन उससे पहले शहबाज, हम इस द रिव्यू के प्लेटफॉर्म के ऊपर ये डिस्कस कर चुके हैं कि वर्ल्ड बैंक वैसे तो पाकिस्तान की अदरवाइज मुख्तलिफ शोबों में लैंडिंग करता रहा है, लेकिन ये पहला मौका है कि उन्होंने एक 10 साला पूरा एक रोड मैप दिया है, प्रोग्राम का ऐलान किया। और वजह उसकी ये है क्योंकि पाकिस्तान में जो सियासी मंजरनामे के ऊपर जो तब्दीलियाँ आती हैं, एक गैर यकीनी की सूरत हाल होती है, तो वर्ल्ड बैंक उन तजुर्बात को सामने रखते हुए एक ऐसा प्रोग्राम चाहता है कि अगर उस पर अमल दरामद हो तो कोई फ़र्क भी पड़ना चाहिए। अब इस प्रोग्राम का बाकायदा आप कह सकते हैं कि उसको लॉन्च कर दिया गया है, तो क्या चीदा चीदा इसकी जो हाईलाइट्स हैं?
कामरान, पहले माजी में ये होता रहा कि जो कंट्री पार्टनरशिप फ्रेमवर्क्स होते थे, इस तरह का जो पार्टनरशिप प्रोग्राम होता था, वो उसको इतनी हाइप नहीं मिलती थी, इतनी उसको इंपॉर्टेंस नहीं दी जाती थी। चूँकि ये पहली दफ़ा हुआ है कि वर्ल्ड बैंक ने दुनिया के किसी भी मुल्क के साथ 10 साला जो प्रोग्राम है उसको अनाउंस किया है, तो इसको जो पजीराई मिली है वो वज़ीर-ए-आज़म पाकिस्तान के लेवल से मिली है। कल साउथ एशिया के जो वाइस प्रेसिडेंट हैं वर्ल्ड बैंक के, उन्होंने प्राइम मिनिस्टर हाउस में इस तकरीब में शिरकत की और वहाँ पर फॉर्मली इसको लॉन्च किया गया। वही बात जो हम पहले कर चुके हैं, 6 बड़े सेक्टर्स हैं। इससे पहले तकरीबन इनके 10 से ज़्यादा सेक्टर्स में वर्ल्ड बैंक की लैंडिंग होती थी और इस दफ़ा जो टारगेट्स हैं वो सिर्फ 10 हैं। जो माजी में जो पिछली कंट्री पार्टनरशिप फ्रेमवर्क था उसके 24 से ज़्यादा अहदाफ थे, तो इन्होंने जो फोकस है वो कम एरियाज़ के ऊपर किया, लेकिन वो एरियाज़ जहाँ पे पाकिस्तान को वाकई वहाँ पे उनको इन्वेस्टमेंट की ज़रूरत है, और है तो ये गैर मुल्की कर्जा, लेकिन उन एरियाज़ में खर्च करने की ज़रूरत है। जैसे आपने बोला, तालीम है, सेहत है, एनवायरनमेंट है, डिकार्बनाइजेशन ऑफ द सोसाइटी, ऑफ द एनवायरनमेंट है। उसके साथ ही फिर हमारे जो फिस्कल के इशूज़ हैं, और लास्टली जो प्राइवेट सेक्टर इन्वेस्टमेंट है वो पाकिस्तान में नहीं आ रही। SIFC के प्लेटफॉर्म से बड़ी कोशिश हुई, उसमें कामयाबी नहीं हुई। अभी हम जब वर्ल्ड बैंक के वाइस प्रेसिडेंट हमें ज्वाइन करेंगे, उनसे पूछेंगे। 2 चीज़ें कल से जो सामने आई हैं, क्योंकि सुबह ये लॉन्चिंग हुई, उसके बाद फिर शाम को एक सेमिनार भी हुआ, तो उसमें क्रिटिकली 2 बातें जो कही। एक, जो वर्ल्ड बैंक के वाइस प्रेसिडेंट ने कहा कि जो पाकिस्तान के इस वक्त जो हालात है, ख़ास तौर पर इन एरियाज़ में जहाँ भी ह्यूमन कैपिटल क्राइसिस है, इसको ठीक होने में 1 या 2 माह नहीं, 1 या 2 साल भी नहीं, उन्होंने कहा कम अज़ कम 10 साल लगेंगे, तो इसलिए हमें ये पार्टनरशिप फ्रेमवर्क देना पड़ा। दूसरी बात, जो वर्ल्ड बैंक के कंट्री डायरेक्टर हैं पाकिस्तान में नाजिब बिन हुसैन, उन्होंने कही कि जो डिजिटल ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन है पाकिस्तान की, उसको उन्होंने बोला कि 100% इनेबलर है। डिजिटल ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन होगी तो पाकिस्तान अपने मसाइल का हल जो है वो तलाश कर पाएगा, नहीं होगी तो फिर ना तो ये डेवलपमेंट प्रोग्राम सही तरीके से इंप्लीमेंट हो सकेगा, ना पाकिस्तान अपने अहदाफ हासिल कर सकेगा। इसमें एक जो चीज़ इंपॉर्टेंट है नाजरीन, ओवरऑल वर्ल्ड बैंक ने पाकिस्तान की जो इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज़ को उसको अप्रिशिएट किया है। उन्होंने ये भी बात की है कि IMF के साथ पार्टनरशिप में वो पाकिस्तान के लिए काम करना चाह रहे हैं, बाकी जो इंटरनेशनल डेवलपमेंट पार्टनर्स हैं उनके साथ मिलकर वो काम करना चाह रहे हैं। बट एक जो चीज़ पाकिस्तान का जो 5 E's का इकोनॉमिक ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन प्लान जो प्राइम मिनिस्टर ने लॉन्च किया, उसके बारे में एक क्रिटिकल कमेंट जरूर किया है वर्ल्ड बैंक ने अपने कंट्री पार्टनरशिप फ्रेमवर्क में। और जो हमने पहले इस पर खबर भी की थी, मैं जुमला दोबारा दोहरा देता हूँ। ये कल बाकायदा तौर पर ये रिपोर्ट हमें कल दी गई है वर्ल्ड बैंक की तरफ से, और ये कल की तारीख की, ये जुमेरात को बल्कि इसको उन्होंने लॉन्च किया था, तो उसके अंदर ये जुमला अभी भी मौजूद है। अ नेशनल विजन, द 5E फ्रेमवर्क टू टर्न अराउंड पाकिस्तान हैज बीन डेवलप्ड but is yet to be translated into clear sectoral plans shared by all tiers of government including provincial governments. वर्ल्ड बैंक पाकिस्तान की प्लानिंग की तरफ तो देख रहा है, लेकिन उनका ये मानना है कि अभी सेक्टोरल प्लान जो है वो तैयार नहीं है। कामरान, दिस इज अ क्रिटिकल एस्पेक्ट। और मेरा ख्याल है कि इसके ऊपर हम बात करेंगे। ये इशू एजुकेशन, हेल्थ, एनवायरनमेंट, इसके हवाले से वर्ल्ड बैंक पाकिस्तान के लिए क्या कर सकता है, और क्या ये 20 अरब डॉलर का जो कर्ज है ये वाकई पाकिस्तान की किस्मत बदल सकता है या नहीं, इसके ऊपर बात करेंगे एक छोटी सी ब्रेक के बाद। हमें ज्वाइन करेंगे शॉर्टली वर्ल्ड बैंक के जो वाइस प्रेसिडेंट फॉर साउथ एशिया है, उनसे बात करेंगे एक आफ्टर अ ब्रेक। स्टे विद अस।
ब्रेक के बाद एक दफ़ा फिर आपको खुशामदीद कहते हैं। ब्रेक से पहले जैसे हम जिक्र कर रहे थे कि वर्ल्ड बैंक ने जो कंट्री पार्टनरशिप फ्रेमवर्क के तहत अगले 10 साल के लिए 20 अरब डॉलर पाकिस्तान को कर्जा देने का ऐलान किया है, और ब्रेक से पहले आपको बताया था कि हमें ज्वाइन करेंगे वर्ल्ड बैंक के वाइस प्रेसिडेंट फॉर साउथ एशिया। इससे पहले भी हमारे प्रोग्राम में आ चुके हैं और वंस अगेन हमें ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं। So let me introduce Vice President of the World Bank for South Asia, Mr. Martin Reiser. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much
tonight on the review. And the first question is that under the country partnership framework, World Bank has promised to provide $20 billion to Pakistan in terms of loans or lending is concerned. Is it guaranteed or indicative lending?
It's indicative. We have under the lending instruments of the bank of the World Bank, Pakistan has access to both concessional funds from the International Development Agency and to non-concessional official lending from the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. In the second, in the IBRD, Pakistan has an exposure allocation that corresponds to the size of its economy, its ability to repay. And in the first, in the IDA, it has an allocation that's really commensurate with the size of its population and the level of poverty in the country. And so the IDA funds get replenished every 3 years. And since we don't know what the replenishments in future cycles are going to be, it's an indicative number. But in the past, we've had roughly $2 billion of lending available for Pakistan every year, and we expect that to continue.
So, Mr. Martin, $2 billion is the number that the World Bank has been on an average lending to Pakistan for past many years. Sometimes it is $1.5 billion, sometimes more during the floods time. So what is new this time? There are a lot of celebrations around this number, $20 billion, 10 years. What is different?
Well, the number is not that different. I think what is different is that with this country partnership framework, we have tried to be more selective. We have tried to be more targeted on outcomes, on eventual outcomes, and we are emphasizing more the partnerships both with the private sector and with other development partners. So what we're looking at in this country partnership framework is 6 outcome areas. We have, I think, a dozen indicators belonging to these 6 outcome areas. But in the previous country partnership framework, we had 35 outcome indicators. So you can see how we're narrowing things down to be more focused. And at the same time, the outcomes that we've chosen, for example, reducing child stunting by 30%, these cannot be achieved in a matter of 2 or 3 or even 5 years. They require a longer term commitment, and so we wanted to use this CPF to really create that long-term joint commitment between the government and ourselves. And so that's really what's different. And then, as I mentioned, the third is that some of these outcome areas are well beyond what we can achieve with our own resources. So we're using it really to bring others on board, to recruit others to the same objective, because we do think these are foundational objectives, foundational goals for the future development of Pakistan.
If I may go...
6 areas that the World Bank this time identified where you would be lending. Half of those areas are actually the responsibility of the provinces.
That's right.
So World Bank is going to lend to the federal government or the provinces?
We have in the past lent to both, and we'll continue to do that.
Okay.
So but the question here is that under the constitution, education, health, these are the provincial subjects now.
Yes.
And there is a debate that under the National Finance Commission, the federal government has already given a lot of resources to the provinces, but at the same time, they didn't take the responsibilities, they couldn't improve the indicators. Where the provincial governments had failed in the past, and because of those reasons, the education indicators, the health indicators, what you call the human capital crisis, it's worsening because of, despite the additional money. So why would the federal government take more loans and spend in areas which are provincial in nature, like health and education? What is the reason and what is the justification for the federal government, when particularly the World Bank at the same time and IMF both are saying the provincial government should take their own responsibilities?
Well, I think we need to look at the money that we spend really as a catalyst for something much more important, which is the governance and reform, the policy reforms that are necessary to achieve these outcomes. For example, in education, there are important reforms in the way schools are governed, in the way teachers are trained, in the way teachers are monitored and incentivized, that have to do with the way this sector is organized at the local, at the district, but also at the provincial level. And so by putting some of our financial and knowledge resources on the table, we try to incentivize the provinces to work with us on a reform program. And by setting out a target in 10 years that we want to reduce learning poverty from 77% to below 60%, that's a major challenge. And by keeping our focus very much on that long-term objective, we will have the opportunity to monitor regularly whether we're making progress. If we're making progress more rapidly, we have the opportunity to provide resources in other areas that need it. If we're making no progress at all, we need to ask ourselves whether we're doing the right thing and whether throwing more money is the right
The question remains that these subjects are the provincial subjects. So why would the federal government take more loans and further lend it to the provincial governments? And there will be a burden on the federal government in terms of repayment of those loans. So what?
Of course, but the loans are highly concessional, and repayment is over a long period of time. So I think the economic gains from improvements in health and education outcomes far outweigh the debt burden that these loans create. The question is, are we achieving the outcomes that we're set out to do? That's, I think, what we need to be held accountable for, and what we want our government partners also to be held accountable for.
Okay, but this is not the first time that World Bank is providing lending for health and education. You were doing this for quite long period, yet if you see the numbers, for example, still 26 million children are out of school. When the stunted children ratio is 38% and 60% in the poor districts. So what is going to be different this time that we are going to achieve objectives and make a real impact?
Well, obviously it takes two to tango, so we cannot guarantee that we will be successful. But by taking a perspective that's very much tied to an outcome, rather than defining inputs, etc., it's an outcome that we want. It gives us the flexibility to adjust how we go about it in mid-course, but it also gives us the responsibility to monitor what are we achieving, and to have an honest conversation. If we're not getting where we want to go, we'll need to stop doing it and do something else.
But as you know that whenever international financial institutions lend money, they also attach certain conditions. For example, Pakistan is currently under the IMF program, and there are series of conditions.
Yes.
This World Bank initiative, do you think Pakistani government and the provinces will have to meet certain conditions before they are able to get their hands on to these lendings?
So in the social sectors, we have long employed, and with good success actually, results-based financing instruments. So again, this ties very much to what I was saying about the long-term outcomes that we are putting at the heart of the design of this country partnership framework. And the disbursement of the funds is essentially retroactive to reimburse the costs to reach a particular outcome. So yes, indeed, it is conditional, but it's not conditional on passing a piece of legislation or a government ordinance or decree. It's conditional on achieving the results. and then the money flows to compensate you for the costs that you have incurred, as a result giving you the resources to do even more and achieve more. So yes, I do think we work with a certain element of expectation and accountability. I wouldn't want to call it conditionality, because in a sense these are not our objectives. These are the objectives for the people of Pakistan, and the government has signed up to them. So it is our joint accountability, but there is accountability in the process. Absolutely.
जी, यहाँ पर एक छोटी सी ब्रेक लेंगे और ब्रेक के बाद हमारी डिस्कशन जारी रहेगी. Welcome back.
So you have been meeting with people, with the provincial authorities, with the federal government authorities. Do you see an element of ownership among the Pakistani stakeholders, and do you think there is really a serious trust between the partners, and they are able to implement all those programs and projects, which would lead to a situation in a scenario where at least all the children of the age, those who have to be in the schools, they are in the schools? Do you see that kind of seriousness in the government, or the government is just interested in getting more loans?
Well, I think it is not, it's not every day that we launch a country partnership framework in the presence of the Prime Minister. It has been actually a feature of the process of preparation of this partnership framework, that whether it is in the consultations at the provincial level, whether it's in the consultations with civil society, whether it's in the work with the government ministries, we've benefited from a lot of ownership and a lot of, in a sense, a lot of support for what we're trying to do. I think that reflects the fact that, as we said about a year and a half ago in our Reforms for a Brighter Future report, Pakistan really is at a moment where it needs to decide. Does it want to move forward towards better outcomes for its people, or does it want to be stuck in low growth, in fact zero growth per capita for extended periods of time? I think the population of Pakistan wishes for a better future, and politicians that want to get votes from that population, I think, are some expectation to deliver. So I think that creates a basis for us to move forward.
Slightly changing the topic, private sector investment, which is very important, but Pakistan has been making attempts to bring the foreign direct investment. It has established the Special Investment Facilitation Council, but still the private sector, or even the total investment, is not more than 0.5% of the GDP. And if we look at the World Bank projection based on October 2024, the number is not bright even in 2030. How do you see that prospect? The SIFC was established, but it couldn't bring the investment. What is required to change this thing, that there is significant investment in Pakistan and it is able to improve the infrastructure with the help of the private sector?
So I think there are several elements that are important. The first is macroeconomic credibility and stability. Nobody is going to invest abroad into a highly volatile macroeconomic environment. On that front, I think we need to record that there has been significant progress. But in addition to that, you need to make credible commitments to the investor, that they can make money, that the regulations will not be changed, that they can get their inputs through customs if they need to, that they will have access to energy on a reliable basis, etc., etc. And none of this is rocket science, but on a lot of these fronts, the performance of Pakistan in the past hasn't been very good. And I think it will take some time for people to build confidence that this is now different. We're not yet seeing it pick up. We think there is a potential for Pakistan to attract a lot more foreign direct investment. The IFC, which is a core part of this strategy, and you were mentioning $20 billion, IFC is expecting to be able to mobilize around the same amount again, so another $20 billion over the next decade, just through their own investments. And of course, that's just a small portion of what we think should be possible. But we're not yet seeing it, so
without
we hope
India part of the game, which is the major economy in that region, of the South Asia region, Pakistan and India, they are not improving their relations, they are not improving their political relations, they are not able to improve their trade relations. Without India, how do you see the scenario in Pakistan in terms of foreign investment?
Well, of course, this is a broader political issue on which, frankly, I'm not sure we have much to say. But I do think Pakistan has, even without those improving relations, has some opportunities for improved exports, has some opportunities for improved, for attracting investments to use the fact that it has a large population, it has still a young population. It should be doing much, much better. Of course, if relations with its biggest neighbor improved, that would be a fantastic additional opportunity for the economy of Pakistan. But I think it should focus on what it has under its own control. And there are many things that it can do to attract more investment.
One of the major problems that Pakistan has been facing is lack of consistency. We saw that often when the government changes, there are also policy reversals. And now it has become a new tradition, even when the finance ministers changes, they even also change their policies. And you, at a public seminar, mentioned that the kind of problem that Pakistan is currently facing, it cannot be resolved in a couple of years. They need a lot of patience. So do you really find the consistency, as you earlier mentioned, that there has to be a realization that where Pakistan wants to be? Do you think that the current leadership, the current government, have the realization that they need certain reforms that we have avoided so long, and key element is the consistency?
Well, I think the fact that they have agreed to a 10-year framework gives you some indication that they realize there needs to be some persistence. Otherwise, you're not going to get to the results. Does that insulate the government against the political vagaries of the day? I don't know. But it certainly shows that with respect to the things that we want to work together on, yes, we absolutely agree that we need to have consistency, we need to have persistence, we need to have stability. Otherwise, these goals will not be achievable.
But did you reach out to other political players? Because Tangier, you never know that today is a one party in the government, tomorrow maybe opposition. So do you really feel that there is a broader consensus on areas where World Bank is really keen?
I think so, yes. We have consulted across the political spectrum. This is part of our preparation process, that we do these consultations with a right group of civil society. We have talked to the opposition as well. I think, the data is pretty stark, okay? 77% of Pakistani children at the age of 10 do not reach a learning level that corresponds to the frontier, to the global frontier, to what would be achievable. That's a pretty stark number.
Yes.
38%, you were mentioning it yourself, of children in Pakistan are stunted. This is the same as in countries that have less than half of the per capita income that Pakistan has. But let's also look at it from the other side. We know from the experiences of Peru, from Indonesia, that stunting rates have been halved in less than a decade. That's precisely why we're saying, okay, let's set out this challenge for ourselves. Surely Pakistan can do it. Pakistan has major historical achievements. If you make this a national objective, then you can definitely make progress in that direction. So we're setting out that offer to all of the stakeholders to work together with us in this direction, and we're pleased that, at least in the form of this country partnership framework, that offer has been accepted.
So out of the 6 areas that have been identified and approved by the World Bank Board, 2 are directly or indirectly related to the climate change. President Donald Trump, he has withdrawn from the Paris climate agreement. Do you think that there can be any adverse impact of the US government's decision in terms of the Paris Climate Agreement on the World Bank funding to Pakistan? Because there will be some funding for these 2 areas.
So let's be clear about what these 2 areas are. The first is improving climate resilience. Whatever you believe the origins of the changing climate are, or how much investment should be put into mitigation, the fact that we are seeing changing weather patterns and that countries like Pakistan are very poorly prepared to deal with them, I think is widely accepted. And I think the history, even the most recent history, shows that vulnerability. So improving climate resilience will remain a priority for us. We have said globally 50% of the resources, a minimum of 50% of the resources that we spend on climate will be on adaptation, and we certainly aim to achieve that in Pakistan. The other is improving or greening the energy system, but also making it more efficient. And it is, I think, true that today the marginal cost of renewable energy in Pakistan is lower than the purchase of fossil fuels from abroad, diesel and LNG, etc. And so Pakistan has an interest, an economic interest, in shifting its energy matrix towards renewables.
जी एक छोटी सी ब्रेक लेंगे यहाँ पर और ब्रेक के बाद हमारी डिस्कशन मार्टिन राइजर के साथ जारी रहेगी. ब्रेक के बाद एक बार फिर आपको खुशामदीद कहते हैं.
The World Bank was in a process to fund a solar panel, a floating solar panel, and there was an idea or at least a proposal at some stage to take a $300 million World Bank loan and to fund this project. But the government of Pakistan, it has shelved this project. You may be knowing about that, the 300 megawatt floating solar panel. How do you see the government's priorities? There was a cheaper financing available. The loan could have been paid back in maybe 3 to 5 years, and cleaner energy. Pakistan shelved that project and it preferred other thermal based or at least some other projects which it wants to do. So do you still think that there is a clear priority of the government of Pakistan to shift towards cleaner energy?
I think that priority is definitely there. I had a discussion today with the Power Minister about the policies in the energy sector. My understanding is that this project did not go through the analysis of whether it corresponds to the least cost expansion plan. If it does and it meets the requirement, the government can always come back and ask for the financing.
A little bit technicality. The internal rate of return of the project was fantastic, and still it was not up to the IGCEP, the framework under which the project has to be eligible for the financing or for even taking over. So what was actually happening behind the scenes? Don't
ask me, I'm not behind the scenes.
because the World Bank was involved in this process, and suddenly the project was shelved by Pakistan.
We are providing an offer of financing for all of the projects, but if a government wants to step away, whether temporary or on a permanent basis from a project, we're not going to force anything on anybody.
Okay. Coming back to this country partnership framework, of course we spoke about lack of consistency and other issues. Security again is a major challenge. For example, the areas that we have identified, the major problem that we are facing in the rural areas, particularly in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan, and these two provinces are facing security challenges. Do you think that this could be a major hurdle in implementing this program?
Well, I think one thing we need to recognize is that Pakistan really is a country of 4 very, very different provinces, and so our approach in each of those needs to be tailored to the circumstances on the ground. And yes, indeed, of course, it's difficult to implement in areas where, for example, we cannot easily travel to, or where contractors that are hired under World Bank financing face security risks. But it is part of the responsibility of our counterparts who are ultimately responsible for the implementation of the projects to deal with these issues, and we can provide the adequate support. So I think we're a development organization. We're used to work in very challenging circumstances. Pakistan's circumstances are challenging, but I'm sure we can offer value even in areas that are challenged as the ones that you mentioned.
Okay, but let's look at it from this positive perspective. Let's assume that all the programs or all the initiatives under this program are by and large implemented. Mm-hmm. How this can impact Pakistan's economy? For example, before this country partnership framework, the foreign direct investment was supposed to be 0.6% of the GDP by 2029. Again, economy of Pakistan to grow 3.8% before this country partnership framework in 2029. Do you think that if this program is implemented in true spirit, this can really change these indicators?
Yes, I think so. And by what I mean implemented in true spirit is not the impact of our investment. but it's the impact of the policy reforms that are necessary to reach the ultimate outcomes. But absolutely, if we see learning outcomes improve significantly, if we see stunting rates decrease significantly, if we see the investment climate improved so that it attracts more FDI, if we see revenue to GDP going up to from single digits to 15% as we're targeting, all of this will create a policy framework, but also will bring in the resources for the kinds of investments that will create much faster economic growth and better living standards for Pakistan.
So in terms of the outcomes, stunting rate, as you have mentioned, and your concluding remarks on these issues, 38% average stunting rate in poor districts, it is 60%. Where do you see Pakistan after 5 years and 10 years? Because you have certain goals in that area.
So we've said that in 10 years we want to reduce it by 30% in the most affected areas. So it would go below 40% of the most affected areas. We heard today from our colleague in UNICEF that in Punjab, the latest multi-indicator survey suggests that stunting rates in Punjab have declined, I think, 4 or 5 percentage points just in the period between 2017 and today. So I think progress in the order of that we're indicated in the CPF is absolutely possible.
So moving towards overall Pakistan's macroeconomic stability, there is an element of relative stability returning to Pakistan. We have in relative terms external sector stability, current account is in surplus, our budget deficit still growing but not at a faster pace. Do you think Pakistan has achieved the fiscal consolidation? It has stabilized the economy, and now from this point it can grow, and it can grow faster, or still Pakistan has to pause and it should maintain the pace that it has been maintaining?
Well, the reforms need to be maintained. I mean, part of the problem that we've had in the past is once the initial consolidation was done, the market's sentiment improved, inflation declined, the government decided, okay, now we can, start relaxing a little bit, giving a little bit of benefits.
Is it the time to relax or not?
No, I don't think so.
How long it can go?
Well, I think the targets of the IMF program has only just started. I think Pakistan has every interest to remain compliant with the IMF program. We are working very closely with IMF, for example, in the area of revenue mobilization. But I think the anchor that provides is a strong complement to what we're trying to do in the long-term development area. So I do think this is important and will remain important. And it will generate fruit because already as a result of the consolidation, the decline in inflation has allowed policy rates to come down. That's reducing the cost of serving the domestic debt. If you stick to this, you can start seeing a lengthening of the maturities on the domestic capital market. That means the gross financing requirement of the government can also gradually be reduced. So you just create the buffers that I was talking about earlier that in previous crises you didn't have. And then you're much more vulnerable to external shocks. So I do think this is not over. But we're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel, and that's very welcome.
Okay, the government recently unveiled a 5-year homegrown economic plan. They call it 5E economic framework, and the government claims that this program will lay the foundation for Pakistan to become $1 trillion economy by 2035. First, how do you see this framework, this economic revival program? Mm-hmm. And second, do you think that Pakistan has the potential to become $1 trillion economy by 2035?
Well, long-term projections are always a little tricky. But if you're thinking grosso modo that Pakistan's GDP in dollar terms should double, a little more than double over the decade, that would require growth in the order of 7 percentage points a year. Is that feasible? Absolutely. Is it currently projected? Probably not. So therefore, we need to look at what are the key reforms that make that possible. We have obviously taken the Uran plan with great interest. In many areas, it is very consistent with the emphasis that we're putting in the partnership framework. It provides, I think, a very good guidepost for our work. And so, again, you were talking about consistency. I think I think it's not so much the content of the plans. My sense is what Pakistan needs to do is relatively widely known and relatively widely shared and accepted. It's actually getting it done, implementing it. That is the key challenge. So I think for us, we're trying to overcome that challenge through this outcome orientation and this longer term perspective, and we hope that helps the government also with that consistency.
Mr. Martin, last question from my side. President Donald Trump, he has made two calls, one to the OPEC and Saudi Arabia to cut the oil prices, and second to European Central Bank and to the Federal Reserve to cut the interest rates. Where do you see the world going?
That's a good question. Our latest global growth projections suggest that the world is going in 2025 to grow roughly at the same rate that it did in 2024. Now, the US economy has been doing very well, and that's been driving a lot of that additional growth momentum. Some other parts of the world are not doing so well, and in particular, the emerging markets and the poorest countries are doing much more poorly than they need to. So, if you look at it from the perspective of developing countries, the world should be doing much better.
Thank you so much, Mr. Martin Reiser. ये वर्ल्ड बैंक के वाइस प्रेसिडेंट थे फॉर साउथ एशिया, और अपना जो डिटेल एनालिसिस है और पूरा पर्सपेक्टिव दे रहे थे जो 10 साल का प्रोग्राम लॉन्च किया गया है। अगले 10 सालों में 20 अरब डॉलर की वो लैंडिंग करेंगे पाकिस्तान को, जो सोशल सेक्टर खास करके एजुकेशन और हेल्थ के शोबे हैं। तो लेट्स सी, इस पर हम नज़र रखेंगे कि किस हद तक हुकूमत पाकिस्तान भी और वर्ल्ड बैंक इस पर अमल दरामद कर पाते हैं। प्रोग्राम द रिव्यू से इतना ही। कामरान यूसुफ और शहबाज राना को अब इजाज़त दीजिए। अल्लाह हाफिज़।